And we're back with a classic character profile now. I use classic in the loosest of terms. It's an old character, but it's one that we probably won't get a chance to mention again after this week. Joe McIntyre, everybody. He was in it for 2 years, between 2008 and 2010. And as old Tina's died now, I thought it would be a chance for us to remember the storylines he was in.
Yep, he was born on the 11th of April 1960 and he died on the 8th of February 2010. So he's just a bit short of his 50th birthday. It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was married to Anna McIntyre, I assume that's Tina's mum, in 1990, and Gail in 2010. He had Tina in 1991. He first appeared on the 26th of May 2008, and he last appeared when he died on the 8th of February 2010. He was in 174 episodes and he was played by Rhys Dinsdale, which is an awesome name.
I know, that is a proper
good name, that is.
Yeah, you're not going to find two of those, I don't think.
No.
But there is somebody else called Joe McIntyre, a famous Joe McIntyre. I can't remember what they're famous for. He'd been in things before, old Rhys, but none of it I'd heard of or knew anything about. Home to Roost, Haggard, Bliss, and Born and Bred. Seen any of those?
They all sound very northern.
They sound like proper northern programmes. I don't know anything about them. But yeah, he just got in Corrie through normal auditions. But he said he wanted to be in Coronation Street after seeing Michelle Keegan's performance as Tina, and he said I was watching it one night and turned to my wife and said, "That girl playing Tina is unbelievable. She's brilliant."
And his wife slapped him round the face and made him sleep on the sofa.
No, well, apparently the next day his agent rang up and said, "Do you want to play Tina's dad?"
And he went, yes.
Yeah, so there you go. That's how he got the role. He said,
if you go into a soap, you're going to be working with good people, and I've not been disappointed.
I think that they had quite a good relationship.
Well, he was lucky, really, because what's her face just got that Lifetime Achievement Award, didn't she? And Tina's the sexiest soap star in the universe, so he had two good co-stars.
I know, and I wonder what would have happened if he'd chosen not to leave, whether we would have kind of kept him on.
I think he would still be in it.
I think he was kind of an interesting character, really. They just didn't have that much time to develop it in those 2 years, but the whole addict... he was a bit hopeless, wasn't he? Because he was like always he never had any money, and he was always trying to hide it from Gail that he was poor. But I think he could have turned out to be quite a good character. And
well, he probably would have got boring the longer he'd stayed on the straight, because they always start off interesting and then their problems are solved, aren't they? And then what do you do?
But we wouldn't have had all that stuff with Gail and Lewis if Joe had still been around.
That's true. He might have charmed her away. Well, in 2008, he visited the street to meet Tina's boyfriend, David, but he ended up dating Gail in secret because it was a bit weird.
Yeah, it's a bit like how the Armstrongs and the Windasses are at the moment, aren't they? Like mums and dads and children together. It's like, need more characters. But Tina and David split up later that year because David was jealous of Tina, and he thought that Tina was seeing somebody else because he couldn't believe that such a weasel face could get the sexiest soap star. But Joe was trying to reunite them. But I don't think he managed it, but he did invite David to work for him as kitchen fitting business, because that's what he was by trade, a kitchen fitter. And it's due to Joe that we got to be introduced to the Windass clan, and they were a right rough bunch at the beginning.
They were like Onslow and co, weren't they, in Keeping Up Appearances?
Or worse. No, they were more like people Shameless, I think, weren't they? Like proper chavs. Because they were fitting this kitchen for them. I remember like when you watch Anna's first scene, and she was a proper like hard-faced fishwife, isn't she? And they refused to pay it. And that was when Eddie was like Eddie's crutch, wasn't he? He was claiming benefits and stuff. Forward. So anyway, they wouldn't pay for the kitchen. So David and Graham, brilliant Graham, come back, ripped it out. In revenge, Gary Windass, who was also a total scally back then, and his uncle Len, dodgy bloke, ripped out Gail's kitchen, and Joe said he would replace at his own expense, even though he was in debt. Gail tried to bury the hatchet with the Windasses that Christmas by inviting them to Christmas dinner, which I thought was a very bizarre step. And it did, of course, lead to Christmas Day bust-up, when Gary and David were getting into a fight over Tina, because Gary was like, "Oh, I'm gonna start going out with Tina. I'm gonna have her," and David didn't like the idea of that. So Joe goes nuts and screams at the Windasses, starts throwing food around, and that's, I think, probably the first that we kind of see the beginnings of Joe's insecure tendencies. He's because he totally loses it when he has his drug addiction later on in the storyline. But anyway, Gail forgives him the next day, but says you got to watch out because that behaviour reminded me of some of my previous psycho husbands, naming no names.
Yeah. So in 2009, he's still trying to hide his money problems from Gail, but he ends up moving in with her when he gets evicted from his flat. And Gary's still trying to make the moves on Tina, which really annoys Joe because he doesn't really he only knows Gary as a layabout from a bad family.
Yeah. So the Windasses then steal some copper pipes from Bill's yard where Joe was working at the time. So they're winding him up. So there's huge friction between the Windasses and Joe in the Platts, but he secretly goes and does a deal with Uncle Len, who says that he's got 19 kitchens for Joe to fit on the condition that he persuades Tina to retract a statement that she'd made against Gary, because he'd got into a fight with David, but do you remember it was David that had thrown the first punch, but Tina had said that Gary had. So
this is like
Joe kind of makes a deal with the devil.
Here's this theme continuing there, because Gary's in trouble for punching somebody, and there's some dodgy dealings with to do with the building trade. It goes round and round.
Yeah. The Gail finds out. They argue because then it all comes out that Gail paid for Tina's abortion the year before. So
why do you have to pay for abortions? I never understand that.
Why?
Don't the NHS let you? I'm sure they would rather you had an abortion than they had to support a child for 18 years.
Well, there you go. It's not a discussion for now.
No, I don't understand. So she throws him out, but she takes him back, which makes David move out to go to live with Martin. Remember Martin?
He lived in Liverpool or something, doesn't he? Or Blackpool or something. So David was off for a bit.
He lives on holiday if he lives in Blackpool.
Tragedy struck for Joe later that year because he was carrying some boxes around. He slipped a disc. And then he tried to go back to work too soon because he was trying to get more money because he was in such dire straits, but that worsened his injuries. And then he became addicted to painkillers, which I thought was quite an interesting storyline. It showed that you can get addicted to painkillers and how such an addiction, because they obviously have like lots of alcohol addiction storylines, particularly with Peter, but painkillers I thought was quite an interesting one. And I think the scene where he was raiding the medical cupboards at the medical centre was really well done. And it also gave David the opportunity to be evil guy again, because he was stealing Joe's painkillers and hiding them, which drove Joe to the black market because Graham, who was as lovable as he was a little bit dodgy.
He's a bit of a drug dealer.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I know I can get you some of these. He was brilliant. He's like the most lovable drug dealer.
So he ends up stealing, like you said, from the medical centre and from Gail.
Yeah. But anyway, that kind of all ends that storyline. Then he buys a boat. Which
was poor.
Which was awesome. I think this must have been he's done the deal with Len now, so he's got his money back. I think that's probably what happened. And yeah, he buys a boat, Gale Force. Awesome. David and Gail and Audrey obviously aren't too happy because he proposes to Gail on the boat, and she falls in love so easily, swept away by the idea of being a wife on a boat. But then,
the dream doesn't last, does it?
No, because Joe's money problems come back again that year because loan shark Rick Neelan turns up, because it turns out that Joe is in debt to him. Gail's like, oh, sell the house. She's like that with Lewis as well, wasn't she? It's like, oh, let's sell up, let's get that hotel in Italy. She really falls head over heels. She's desperate.
Get away from the bloody street.
I think that's what it is.
Someone take me away.
So he's in debt to this loan shark. And then in 2010, the day before his wedding to Gail, he borrows money from Gail's dad, Ted. Whatever happened to him?
I remember Ted. He was good.
He was in Harry Potter, and then he's never come back. No. So he marries Gail. But at the reception, Rick turns up and informs Joe that he owes him another £5,000 in interest. Only one thing to do. Fake your own death. Yeah. Insurance fraud. So they had their honeymoon in the Lake District, Joe and Gail, and he was
like, perfect place to die.
Yeah, and I really like those episodes. I like a bit of on location shooting for Coronation Street, as you know. Lake District is always nice. It's a good, nice, beautiful area of the country, and so he takes Gail up there, and then he reveals to her his plan, and she's horrified about it. So he's like, she won't let him do it, but she can't stop him from sailing off. They have a bit of an argument on the pier, which is one of the reasons that Gail was later implicated in his murder. And he's sailing off and accidentally does kill himself. What are the chances of that? Irony or something. And so he ends up at the bottom of Lake Windermere or wherever it is, and because his body's sort of found floating around a couple of weeks later, and that's the end of Joe. So it was a bit tragic, really. His whole story was a bit tragic, and he does kind of remind me of John Stape.
Yeah, well, it ends up that people think that Gail was involved in this. Tina thinks that Gail was involved, and she has to prove her innocence.
Yeah, I think that was probably the beginning of me not liking Tina when she turned against Gail there, because it showed that she did have a bit of a nasty, vindictive streak.
She didn't have any loyalty.
No, because I really liked Tina and David together, as you know, and this was like the end of those two, I guess. But that was it. After 2 years, he'd left because he was scared of being typecast. I don't know, typecast as what?
Famous actor.
Desperate, drug addicted. Husband to Gail, sailor.
If you're an actor and you turn down a regular paying gig, I think you need your head examined.
Well, what's he been in since? I don't know.
Well, we wouldn't know, would we?
I've not seen him in anything, but we don't watch very much else. But yeah, he was even offered a pay rise because the producers of it must have really loved him to have offered him such an increase.
Yeah, he was a good actor.
Yeah, he was great, and he and Michelle Keegan had a pretty good relationship. But that was it, and I do wonder how things would have been different if he'd been able to stay married to Gail, but oh well, things aren't to be. And how would the things have been different for Tina if she'd had her dad on the street all the time? Because what would he have thought of Tommy? Would she have turned to him rather than Rita? What would Joe's reaction have been to find out about him and Peter? I reckon he probably would have tried to have a go at beating Peter up or something.
Yeah. Put your jukes up, Peter.
That would have been quite interesting to have had, because they did actually mention, Tina did, I know what addicts are like, Peter, because with his alcohol addiction, because my dad was an addict.
Do you think that's why she was attracted to him?
Well, to go for a father.
Well, yeah, a lot of women do end up, don't they?
Yeah, but I don't know whether it's to do with addiction. I don't think, I think when she said that to Peter, I was like, well, he was only an addict for a little bit. He had depression when he was younger, but...
You're like, you don't know anything about it. Your dad was only a drug addict for 2 years. Was that not enough?
No, not 2 years. I can't remember how long the addiction storyline.
Well,
but yeah,
anyway.
I like Joe when he was in it, but oh well.
He's gone now.
He's gone. He's not coming back. And that's it. And that's that. We still have the name McIntyre in the street, just as long as Gail doesn't marry someone else. But maybe she'll be Gail Rodwell before the end of the year.
Maybe. So that was our character profile.
Joe McIntyre.